Hello, everyone. This is Wilmer Pereira with the S624 Quality Management. And the purpose of this video is to start reviewing the tools on the define phase of the Lean Six Sigma methodology. So we are going to review in this video two tools that will help us to articulate the problem, the goal, and the scope of the project. And these are the project charter and the in and out frame. So the learning objectives for these videos is for us to learn to articulate the purpose of the project charter, what is it about and why we use it, to identify what are the elements of a good problem and goal statement, list the type of project metrics and why it's important for us to know about them and what are the difference between the different types of project metrics, and then recall or learn how to define project scope using a tool that is called the in and out frame. Very simple tool. So we will get started with the first tool, which is the project charter. So the project charter is a contract among project stakeholders, and it really helps us to describe the key elements of the project. The project charter has a number of elements. It will contain the problem statement, the business case, the goal statement, the project scope, the project metrics, the key stakeholders, the project team, the project timeline, and that's it. And it looks like this. So a project charter it can be a slide on a PowerPoint or in a Google Slides, or it can be a document, a Word document. But the purpose is that it's a little document, is a contract, as I said at the beginning, that it helps everybody that is involved in the project understand at a glance what are we doing and what are we trying to fix. So we start by understanding what is the problem that we have at hand. We in the problem, we elaborate about what is the defect, how long has it been occurring, and why is this an issue. And then in the business case, we continue elaborating why it's this important for us to fix it, what will be the benefit to fix the problem, how this project aligns with the business strategy. Sometimes we want to solve problems that they are contributing to the bigger business strategy for the company. So, and then we detail our goal statement. As I mentioned in previous videos, the goal statement should be very easy if we did our homework, articulating the problem statement. So the goal statement would specifically describe what we are delivering and by when, and what are the improvements, objectives, and targets that we would like to see. In the goal statement, we will use our metrics to be able to quantify what success looks like. Another element that is very, very important in the project charter is the scope section. And in the scope section, we are defining the boundaries of our project. And then we are describing what are we taking in and what we are leaving out. If we think about processes, they can be very long. If I am analyzing the process of making a cup of coffee, I can start all the way from ordering the beans, right from my supplier, to be delivered to my coffee shop. But maybe I want to define like the scope of my process that I am trying to fix is the making of a cup of coffee that starts by the time that the customer gets into the coffee shop, orders a cup of coffee, and stop at the moment that the cup of coffee is delivered to the customer. So it's important that we understand what are the start and the end point of the process that is within the scope of our effort. And then and by doing that, we will describe what we are not analyzing and what problems. If there are problems with the delivery of the coffee beans from our suppliers, well, that's out of scope and that's not a problem that we are solving right now. We are just trying to solve issues with delivering the cup of coffee once the customer is in the store and is ordering a cup of coffee. So it's important in the project charter to describe what is in the scope of our effort, of our analysis, and what is out. Another important section in the project charter is the metric section. And the metric section is going to tell us how we are measuring the problem, how we are going to quantify the problem and the goal. So if we have a problem, let's say with the cycle time, the amount of time that it takes us to make a cup of coffee is too long, then the metric will be cycle time or time to make a cup of coffee. And then that will help us to quantify what is the problem. We can say, well, it's taking us 15 minutes on average to make a cup of coffee. I think that most customers will say, well, that's probably a little bit too long. So it will be important for us to work on that because otherwise we will lose customers if we don't deliver a cup of coffee within an acceptable time frame duration cycle time. So defining the metrics in the project charter is important and is tied with our problem. So when we describe the problem, we wanted to try to describe it in a way that would show with numbers what is happening. And then it's also the metrics are also tied to the goal, right? So we want to increase the cycle time to deliver a cup of coffee from 15 minutes to, let's say, 5 minutes. So that's our goal, right? So we want to reduce the amount of time that it takes us to deliver a cup of coffee from 15 minutes, which is the measure, the metric, to 5 minutes, which is the measure, the metric, but the target to be where we are striving to go. So it's important to, during the define phase, while we are working on the project charter, to give considerably amount of thought on the metrics that we are going to use on our project. Then there is a few more sections. One is to detail who are the key stakeholders of our project. So the key stakeholders is like pretty much all the people that is being touched by the process. And it's important that we identify them and we know who they are because they are likely going to be affected by the changes that we are going to be doing in the process to improve it. And then it's important that we ask for their feedback and ask for their opinions and their experience. And at the very least, we inform them of the changes that we are going to make so when it happens, they are not surprised. And then the project team is usually a smaller group of people. They are, also key stakeholders of the project, but we cannot have every single one, right? So we just select a representation of project team members. And then the other section in the project charter is to have a high-level timeline on how long it's going to take us to deliver the effort. It might be informed by the 5 phases of the Lean Six Sigma methodology. So we can say, well, the define phase is going to be done in the month of January. The measure phase is going to be in the month of February, analyze in March, improve in April, control in May. Just a high-level overview of the timeline to move through the different phases of the methodology. And these are the key elements of a project charter. And all of these together, they really help for everybody who is working on this project to have alignment. So what we are trying to achieve here is that everyone is clear on what we are doing and why we are doing it and who is doing it and when we are going to do it. So, and this is very important because lack of any of those pieces, it creates a lot of confusion within the team members. So this is always time well spent to provide a lot of clarity on our efforts. I highlighted before, but there are three key elements of the project charter that I want to spend more time, which are the problem statement, the goal statement, and the project scope. So I'm going to start with the problem statement. So for every project at the beginning, we need to write what the problem is. So we need to answer these questions. What is wrong? How big is the problem? How often do we see it? What is the impact that the problem has on the business? Is there a financial impact? Is there, we will lose customers? We are not being compliant with the law. We are having a risk that we need to mitigate before it happens. So we want to describe in a way that everybody can understand in a succinct way what is the problem. And we use the problem statement to do that. So a good problem statement has 5 elements. So the first one, it should have the object. What is the scene that there is a problem with? What is giving us a headache? Is it the delivery of a cup of coffee? So we need to describe, to name it, the object. We need to also describe what is the defect on the that we are seeing on the object. So if we continue with our example of a coffee shop, it might be the cycle time. So the cycle time is too long. That's the defect. That's what's wrong. Customers are not coming back because it's taking us a long time to deliver a cup of coffee. So we have a defect in our production system. What is the extent? And here is like we want to quantify how big is the problem. So, and here we started using measures and metrics. And an example can be, well, on average, it takes us to 15 minutes to make a cup of coffee. So, you know, the measure here, which is the amount of time that it takes to make a cup of coffee, around 15 minutes, is the extent of the defect, which is it's taking too long. And then, so we need to articulate that in our problem statement. Last is the impact. So what is the business impact of having this defect? What is the so what? Why do I care? It's like, well, if we don't reduce the cycle time to deliver a cup of coffee, likely customers are not going to come back because it takes us too long and the service is not timely. And they, you know, people, they don't want to spend 15 minutes waiting for a cup of coffee. So that will decrease the amount of repeat customers that we have. And then the last element that we should have in a good problem statement is the time frame. And by this, it means like by how long have we been seeing this problem? So we can say, well, in the last week, we saw that the average time to deliver a cup of coffee was 20 minutes or 50 minutes. And this is a problem because customers, they don't want to wait this long, and then they won't return. And the amount of customers that we'll have will decrease over time. And that will impact the viability of our coffee shop, right? So that it can be one way to describe a problem statement. But let me also mention what is not, what are no elements on a problem statement. We in the problem, we shouldn't include root causes or presumed causes of the defect that we're seeing. So we should leave that for later. We will have a whole phase, the analyze phase, that where we are going to talk about what are the root causes of the problem. So for now, we shouldn't include what we think is creating the problem. We shouldn't suppose solutions either. We shouldn't say in our problem statement how we are going to fix the problem. So we will leave that when we get to the improve phase of the methodology. Then that's where we are going to brainstorm solutions and select the best solution to eliminate the root causes of the problem. And lastly, we shouldn't assign any blame. So we shouldn't say, oh, this is because Wilmer doesn't know how to make coffee and he never learned and he's very stubborn and whatnot. So when we are writing a problem statement, we shouldn't assign blame, we shouldn't suppose solutions, and we shouldn't presume causes. This is an example of a problem statement, and I'm going to read it. 35% of customer cases for the global expense process in January 2016 require one or more escalations. This resulted in extra time spent on manual workarounds with average delays of 10 days per case and customer frustration. Well, here we are moving a little bit away from the coffee shop example, and we are going into a company business problem. You know, employees in companies, they have expenses, they have to travel, they have to buy equipment, material, and these are business expenses that they need to be reconciled and they need to be sent to the finance team to process and to clear, right? And then in this case, we see that 35% of customer cases, so these are cases to clear expenses in January of the year 2016 required escalation. So it wasn't a happy path. The process wasn't going through a happy path, but it had to be escalated to someone with more seniority to troubleshoot because there were problems with the global expense process. These resulted in manual workarounds. So more labor from the people have to be dedicated to solve the issues with the customer cases for global expenses. And then this increase the average time it takes to resolve these cases, creating delays of 10 days per case in average, and this creates customer frustration. So imagine that I buy material that I need to do my job with my personal credit card, and then I am going to expense it because it's a business expense. It's for the company that I work for, and then the payment back to me, it doesn't come timely. It takes too long because there are all type of issues. And then, so this is a problem. And when we see this problem statement, we see that it has all the elements of a good problem statement. So we see that it has the object. The object is the thing that is wrong, right? In this case, is customer cases for the global expense process. We see that it has the defect in orange. These require one or more escalations, so which means that they didn't go through the happy path, the happy trail, but they have to be troubleshoot and a special consideration have to be given to these cases. It has the extent, how big was the problem. Here it says 35% of all these cases had to be escalated. So it's a big chunk of the overall number of cases. Then had the impact. Well, why so important? Well, this is creating additional effort through manual workarounds. This is creating delays in the processing of the payment, and is creating frustration. And it has the time frame, which is in red, that we saw the spike of these cases being escalated in January 2016. So we see here that this problem statement has all the key elements. It has the object, it has the defect, it has the impact, it has the extent, and it has the time frame. So this is a good example. And this is how each of our problem statements should look like. They are succinct, they are not heavily verbose, but they have all the key elements that we need to understand what is the problem that we're trying to resolve. And then we move into the goal statement. And the goal statement includes a description of what is to be accomplished. It gives a measurable target for desired results. It identifies the projected completion date to reach the goal, so it's time bound. And here we have an example. We want to reduce late deliveries from 23 to 5% by December 2016. But let's look at the elements of a goal statement. So the goal statement, a good goal statement should have 4 elements. It should have a measure. What is the measure that will be improved? What measure, how are we quantifying our success? It should have a direction. Where do we want that measure, that metric to move? Do we want it to increase or do we want it to decrease? It has an improvement target. So how much improvement do we need to get? So we want to improve by 20%, by 30%. We want to reduce the cycle time of making that cup of coffee from 15 minutes to 5 minutes. So it has to describe a target. Where do we want to go? And it needs to be time bound. It needs to have a time frame of what or by when do we want to see the improvements. So if we relate this element to the example of the problem statement that I showed you before, we know that the measure is the percentage of escalated customer cases. We know that the direction for our goal is to reduce that percentage, right? Less percentage of escalated customer cases is better, is more efficient. We set up a target of reducing that percentage by 75%, and we detail a time frame. We want to reduce it by the end of the 3rd quarter in the fiscal year 2018. So if we put all those elements together, we can write a very succinct goal statement that it reads: reduce percentage of escalated customer cases by 75% by the end of Q3 fiscal year 2018. So so this is a great example. So goal statements are short, succinct, and same with the problem statements. Is they just need to have the elements that are needed and no more, no less. And then that moves us into a conversation on project metrics. And as you see, project metrics, they are very important because we use them in our problem and our goal statements. And then metrics or measures, They're usually a standard unit used to express the size, amount, or the degree of something, right? So it's a quantitative unit that we use to measure something. It can be pretty much anything. So in a process project in operations management, we're trying to improve the efficiency of our operations. There are some common measures and metrics that we see all the time. So we have cycle time, and I alluded to this in the example of the coffee shop. So often we want to make sure that we deliver products and services in a timely manner so that we don't make the customers wait too long. We also may want to reduce the number of defects. We don't want to deliver products or services that are defective and that will going to create customer dissatisfaction and then avoid customers from returning or recommending our products and services. We might also measure unit cost, how expensive it is for us to produce a product or services on time with the right level of quality. And we may want to strive, or our goal might be to reduce the unit cost, the cost of producing a product or a services with the same cycle time, with the same level of quality, but cheaper, so it costs us less. So these are the most common ones. And then, so what are the characteristics of projects metrics? The answer is these measurements or metrics should link directly to the project goal and through them to the benefits for the enterprise. So as I mentioned, so we want to make sure that when we are thinking about what is our problem statement, our goal statement, we try to, from the beginning, start thinking, okay, how do I measure this problem? And then these are some of the most common ones that we see in operations management, but also they have to link the problem that we have at hand with the benefit to the organization. And we can clearly see that if we reduce the cycle time, we will have happier customers, and then like they will return. If we reduce the number of defects, yes, we are delivering more quality, and then probably we'll have happier customers, and they will return. And if we reduce unit cost, that also is going to have an effect because we'll probably lower our prices, and we will have more customers and return customers, and our business is going to be viable. So linking measure and metrics to our problem goals and the overall purpose of our business is what we are doing here. So there are three types of metrics that I want to introduce you. The first one is primary metric, secondary metrics, the second one, and consequential metric. In a project, we always have a primary metric. We can say, hey, we want to reduce the cycle time of delivering that cup of coffee because it's taking too long, and that's the most important that we wanna. That's the purpose of the goal, right? So the primary metric is the primary measure that will be an indicator of project success. A secondary metric, it can be, yes, I want to reduce cycle time, but I want to make sure that the quality of my cup of coffee is the same, right? So I still have a delicious cup of coffee that is the right temperature, and it has the right ratio of coffee and milk and so on, right? So then, primary is cycle time, but we want to keep an eye on, as we can use as a secondary metric, quality. And then we have consequential metrics, which is a third type of metrics that we want to make sure that, that these are the metrics that might move in an inverse relationship from the primary metric. So for example, I say, well, I want to decrease the cycle time to deliver a cup of coffee. And then, okay, a solution might be, it's like, okay, I will have more than one barista at the time, working more than one espresso machine, right? So there are several baristas, several espresso machines, but guess what? So that's going to increase my cost. So then, as a consequential metric, I may want to have a cost, of producing, of production of coffee, because if I need to add more than one barista or more equipment, then yes, I might be decreasing the cycle time, but the cost of operations is increasing, and I want to keep a balance. So when we think about a project, a problem, and the metrics, we want to understand, hey, there are a set of different metrics. Some they are going to be primary, and that's what how success of our primary goal is going to be measured. Secondary metrics, there are other stuff that is very important that we wanna also improve, or make sure that it doesn't deteriorate. And consequential are those ones that, hey, like if when I say that if I improve this metric might move in a different direction, and so by solving this problem I am creating another problem, and I want to keep an eye, so I don't want to do that, right? So I want to fix a problem and don't create problems anywhere else. So we want to have consequential metrics as well. Very good. So we cover a little bit of the project charter, as I said, like the problem statement, the goal statement, and then there is a third piece in, it's also included on the project charter, that is the project scope. We want to define what is the scope of our effort. And let me, by analogy, let me tell you what is scope, right? When we are talking about a project. So let's, as an analogy, let's give you, like let's talk about a little bit about the country. So, like the government, there is the federal government, that the scope of the federal government is the whole country as a whole. Then probably, the governor, each governor, the governor of California, the scope of what he needs to manage is the state of California. So the scope is, is contained just within the state of California. And then we may have the city of San Francisco. So the mayor of San Francisco, the scope is not the state, it's not the country, it's just the operations of the city of San Francisco. So that's an example of scope at the government level, right? So we can say that the president is managing the scope of the country, the governor is managing the scope of the state, and the mayor is managing the scope of the city, different levels of scope. In a similar, another example can be the San Francisco State University. So we have a campus and a university in San Francisco that it has different schools, and then so we have the business school, which is one of several schools, and then the business school we have departments, and we have the decision science department. So and these are the scope, right? So we have the provost, I'm not sure what is their name, like see the whole San Francisco State University campus. We have the dean of the business school, and we have the chair of the decision science department, and they all manage a different level of scope. So a project is a little bit like that. So in a project, we want to define what is the scope. Are we talking about the whole thing? a small part or a little part. So that is within the scope of our effort. And then we can use this tool that helps us to identify project scope. We can use this 2x2, and this is a little bit of matrix, and we can ask this question: what must this project accomplish? What is out of bounds for the team? What resources are available to the team? And what constraints must the team work under? So when we are in an effort, in a process improvement effort, we may want to take one of these questions one of the time and answer them, right? So let's relate it back to the coffee shop example. So we're trying to improve the cycle time of delivering coffee shop. So what must this project accomplish is reducing the cycle time of delivering a coffee shop. What is out of bounds for the team? Well, as I mentioned before, the delivery, the relationship with the coffee bean suppliers, the milk suppliers, the espresso machine supplier, that's out of bounds. That's other processes that they may have their problems, but we are assuming that we have the coffee beans, the milk and the espresso machines, and then we are in the effort of producing a coffee chim in a good cycle time for our customers. So all those processes, the supply processes of the coffee beans, the latte, the equipment, they are out of bounds for the project. So what resources are available for the team? So we want to say, well, so yeah, so do we want to, like usually on these questions, it's going to help us inform, because maybe if I don't have all the resources available, so for example, if I don't have information systems available to helping me measure and track data on the start time and the stop time of creating a coffee machine, well, it's going to be a little bit more difficult, right? So I need to gather data manually. So I need to think about what is available for me, and that might dictate what is the scope of the project. And then what constraint must the team work under? So we need to also think about, well, maybe we won't be able, it's out of scope to think of buying a new espresso machine that is faster, or it has several outlets to make cup of coffees in parallel. That's out of bound, because so we don't want, that's a big expense, and we are not going to invest on upgrading the equipment. So that's a constraint. So, and like that, we need to define, okay, what are we need to think and talk to the team, what are the constraints that we need to operate under. So by answering these questions, it's going to help us to understand and define the scope of our project. And that brings us to a tool that I use often to help brainstorm with the team what is in scope and what is out of scope of the project. So I use the questions that I showed you in the slide before to help the team think about the different factors. But then this is an exercise when we ask the team to use a Post-it or to freely brainstorm, to throw ideas of what elements are within the scope of the effort and what is willing to be outside. And then everything that the team thinks is within the scope is going to be put in the inside frame. So you know, we create a slide, and then we put a square, and then all the ideas, one idea per square, are put inside. In this case, cost per order process, redesign of online tools. So these are random ideas from other processes, but whatever it is within the scope, it goes inside. Whatever is outside the scope, reorg of order operations, location of service centers, we put them outside of the scope of outside of the frame. And there might be instances where there is doubt, right? So we are not quite sure. And then we can put them on the border, and then they may require more discussion and more analysis to understand if these elements are within the scope or outside the scope of the project. But this exercise is a brainstorming exercise just to align with the team on what is in and what is out. And that covers all the everything for the learning objectives of this video. There were the first two tools on the define phase, which were the project charter and the in and out scope. So see you in the next video.